I walked into the house, feeling a rare sense of contentment. Work had gone smoothly, and I even managed to leave early, something I hadn't done in weeks. As I closed the door behind me, I called out, "Honey, I'm home." But instead of the usual greeting, I was met with an unexpected outburst. My wife, Karen, stormed into the hallway, her face twisted in fury. "How dare you!" she shrieked. "How dare you humiliate my lover like that?" I stood there, taken aback. I had anticipated a peaceful evening, maybe even a nice dinner, not this. "Excuse me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What are you talking about? You know damn well what I'm talking about," she spat. "Your little stunt today was beyond cruel. How could you?" I couldn't help but let out a small, merciless laugh. "You mean making sure that scumbag can no longer fool around with married women? Yeah, I think I did the right thing." Karen's eyes flashed with rage, but she didn't say anything. She just stood there, breathing heavily, as if she was trying to find the right words to hurl at me. I seized the opportunity to press on. "You know, Karen, I thought you'd be relieved. I thought you'd be grateful that someone finally put an end to his antics, but I guess I misjudged the situation." "Grateful?" she shouted, her voice going up an octave. "Grateful that you humiliated him in front of everyone? He was just trying to be there for me to support me." I cut her off, shaking my head. "No, Karen, he was trying to destroy our marriage, and you were letting him." She stared at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Regret? Guilt? As gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same stubborn defiance. "You just don't understand," she said, her voice lower now, almost a whisper. "Then make me understand," I replied, my patience wearing thin. "Explain to me why you've been sneaking around behind my back, lying to me, betraying me. Explain to me why you've chosen him over us." Karen's shoulders sagged, and she seemed to deflate right before my eyes. "It's not that simple," she murmured, looking away. "It was never just about him. It was about everything. About how you never have time for me. About how you take me for granted. About how lonely I felt for so long." Her words stung, but I forced myself to remain calm. "And cheating on me was the solution to all that? You thought that having an affair would fix our problems?" She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know. Maybe I just wanted to feel something again, to feel wanted, to feel alive." "At the expense of our marriage," I said, the bitterness seeping into my voice. "Well, congratulations, Karen. You got what you wanted. I hope it was worth it." She looked at me then, really looked at me. And for the first time in a long time, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But that woman was a stranger now, lost behind layers of deceit and betrayal. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but it sounded hollow, empty. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. "I don't know if sorry is enough," I said, my voice barely audible. "Not this time." As I walked up the stairs to our bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of the end. The revelation of her affair was a wound that would take a long time to heal, if it ever did. And in the meantime, there was so much more to uncover, so much more pain to endure. Little did I know the worst was yet to come. The bedroom was quiet, almost too quiet. The bed, which had once been a place of comfort, now seemed cold and foreign. I sat on the edge, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and anger. In my head, each one a dagger that pierced my heart. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, slow and hesitant. She paused at the doorway as if unsure whether to come in. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. I looked up at her, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, almost. "Talk about what, Karen? How you destroyed our marriage, how you lied to me every day." She winced, but stepped into the room. "I know I messed up, okay, but I need you to understand why." "Why?" I repeated, shaking my head. "Why you thought it was okay to cheat on me? Why you let some loser come between us?" "It's not that simple," she insisted, sitting down on the bed next to me. "I was lonely, Mark. You were always at work, always busy. I felt like I was invisible." "So you decided to make yourself visible to him?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "That was your solution?" "I didn't plan it," she said, her eyes pleading. "It just happened. He was there when I needed someone. I felt a surge of anger, and I wasn't. I was out there busting my ass to provide for us, to give us a good life. And you repay me by sleeping with him? Karen flinched, tears streaming down her cheeks. I know it sounds terrible, but I was desperate. I needed to feel something, anything. Even if it meant betraying me, I asked, my voice breaking. Even if it meant destroying everything we had built together? She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I'm so sorry, Mark. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for it to go this far. Well, it did, I said, standing up. And now we have to deal with the consequences. We looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Just then, the doorbell rang. We both froze, staring at each other. Who could that be? Karen whispered, her voice filled with fear. I walked to the window and peeked outside. My heart sank when I saw who it was. It's him, I said, my voice cold. Your lover? His eyes widened in panic. What is he doing here? I have no idea, I replied, turning to face her. But we're about to find out. I marched downstairs, Karen trailing behind me. I threw open the door, and there he was, looking just as smug as ever. What do you want? I demanded. He smirked, leaning casually against the door frame. I came to talk to Karen. Well, she's not available, I said, blocking his view, and you have no business being here. He glanced over my shoulder at Karen, who was standing on the stairs, her face pale. Karen, please, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, I said, stepping closer to him. You need to leave, now. He chuckled, clearly enjoying the confrontation. Why don't you let Karen decide that? As this is my house, I said, my voice rising, and I decide who stays and who goes. He raised his hands in mock surrender. All right, no need to get aggressive, I'll go. He turned to leave, but not before giving Karen a lingering look. I'll be waiting, he said, his voice low. I slammed the door shut and turned to Karen, who looked like she was about to faint. What the hell was that about? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know, I swear I didn't ask him to come. Well, he did, I said, feeling the anger bubble up again. And if you think for 1 second that I'm going to let him ruin what's left of our marriage, you're wrong. Karen sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm so sorry, Mark. I never wanted any of this to happen. I watched her for a moment, my heart aching. I'd heard everything. I still loved her, but love wasn't enough to fix what was broken. Not anymore. We'll figure this out, I said finally, my voice softening, but it's going to take time and a lot of work. She looked up at me, hope flickering in her eyes. You mean that? I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settle on my shoulders. Yeah, I mean that. But you have to be honest with me from now on. No more lies, no more secrets. I promise, she whispered, reaching out to me. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. As I took her hand, I knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for now it was a start, and maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other. The next few days were a blur. Karen and I barely spoke, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I spent most of my time at work, avoiding the painful reality of home, but I knew we couldn't continue like this forever. We needed to confront the situation head-on, no matter how difficult it was. One evening, I came home to find Karen sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers in front of her. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red from crying. We need to talk, she said quietly. I sighed, feeling the weight of the day's exhaustion settle on my shoulders. Yeah, I guess we do. She gestured to the chair across from her. Please sit. I hesitated, then took a seat. What's all this? I asked, nodding toward the papers. Divorce papers, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My heart skipped a beat. You're filing for divorce? She shook her head. No, but I thought you might want to, after everything. I stared at the papers, the reality of the situation hitting me like a ton of bricks. Karen, I don't want a divorce, not yet anyway, but things can't go on like this. She looked relieved, but also confused. Then what do you want? I want honesty, I said firmly. I want to know everything that's been going on. No more lies, no more secrets. She nodded slowly. Okay, I'll tell you everything. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Start from the beginning. She took a deep breath, wiping away a stray tear. It started a few months ago. I met him at a friend's party. He was charming, attentive. Everything I felt was missing in our marriage. We started talking, and it just escalated from there. "But how?" I asked, my voice tight. "We started seeing each other secretly at first. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. It felt so good to be wanted, to be needed. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my emotions in check. And then it got physical." She admitted, her voice trembling. "At first it was just kissing, but then it went further." "How far?" I demanded, my heart pounding in my chest. We looked away, unable to meet my gaze. We slept together several times. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had suspected as much, but hearing her say it out loud made it real. "And you never thought to tell me? To stop?" I wanted to, but I was scared. She said, tears streaming down her face. "I was scared of losing you, of losing everything we had." "Well, congratulations," I said bitterly. "You managed to do that anyway." She broke down, then sobbing uncontrollably. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay, but I couldn't, not yet. "We need to set some ground rules," I said, my voice hard. "If we're going to try and make this work, you need to cut off all contact with him completely." She nodded, sniffling. "I already have. I blocked him on everything. I haven't spoken to him since you found out." "Good," I said. "And we're going to see a marriage counselor. We need help, Karen. We can't do this on our own." She nodded again. "Okay, I'll do whatever it takes. I just want us to be okay again." I stood up, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in days. "Then let's start with that. One step at a time." As I headed upstairs to the bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. There were still so many unanswered questions, so much pain to work through. But for now, it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to heal. But as I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, I couldn't ignore the nagging doubt in the back of my mind. Could I ever really trust her again? Or was this just a temporary Band-Aid on a wound that would never fully heal? The next morning, I woke up to find Karen already up and dressed, a determined look on her face. "I made an appointment with a marriage counselor," she said, handing me a business card. "We're going tomorrow." I took the card, feeling a mix of hope and apprehension. Okay, let's see how it goes. As the day wore on, I couldn't help but think about the man who had come to our house. The man Karen had been involved with. What was his deal? Why had he been so bold, so arrogant? And more importantly, was he really out of our lives for good? That evening, as we sat down to dinner, I decided to bring it up. Karen, about that guy. Why was he here? What did he want? She looked uncomfortable, shifting in her seat. "He wanted to talk to me. He said he needed closure." "Closure?" I repeated, incredulous. "After everything he's done." "I know," she said quickly. "But I told him it was over. I told him I'm choosing you." I stared at her, trying to gauge her sincerity. "And you meant it?" She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "Yes, Mark, I meant it. I want to fix this. I want to fix us." I wanted to believe her, I really did, but trust was a fragile thing, and once broken, it was nearly impossible to fully restore. "We'll see," I said finally. "But if I find out you're still seeing him or even talking to him, we're done. No second chances." "I understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I promise, Mark, I won't let you down." As we cleared the table and got ready for bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the calm before the storm. There were still so many unanswered questions, so much unresolved tension, but for now, all we could do was take it one day at a time and hope that the future held something better for us both. The next day, we went to our first counseling session. The therapist, Dr. Larson, was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. She listened patiently as we recounted our story, offering insights and suggestions along the way. "I think the first step is to rebuild trust," she said, looking between us. "That means complete transparency, open communication, and a commitment to working through this together." Karen nodded eagerly. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes." I glanced at her, then back at Dr. Larson. "I just don't know if I can ever trust her again." "It's a process," Dr. Larson said gently. "It won't happen overnight, but if you're both committed to making this work, there's hope." As we left the session, I felt a glimmer of optimism. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move past this. But as we drove home, I couldn't help but wonder what other surprises lay in store. Because if there was one thing I'd learned from this whole ordeal, it was that life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. And something told me we weren't out of the woods yet. The first counseling session gave me a sliver of hope, but it also left me with a gnawing sense of uncertainty. Karen and I were trying to patch up our broken marriage, but there was no guarantee it would work. The first, once shattered, is hard to mend. A few days after the session, I was sitting at my desk at work, trying to focus on an important project. But my mind kept drifting back to Karen, to her betrayal, to the smug look on her lover's face. My phone buzzed, jolting me from my thoughts. It was a text from Karen. "Can you come home early tonight? We need to talk." My heart sank. What now? I'm just being texted back. I'll be there. I left work earlier than usual, my stomach in knots. When I walked into the house, Karen was waiting for me in the living room. She looked pale, her eyes puffy from crying. "Mark, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice shaky. I felt a chill run down my spine. "What is it, Karen?" She took a deep breath. "He's been trying to contact me. I blocked him on everything, but he's been showing up at my work, leaving notes on my car." Anger flared inside me. "And you didn't think to tell me this sooner?" "I was scared," she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't want to make things worse. Worse. Karen, this is already a mess. We're trying to rebuild trust and you're keeping secrets again?" I couldn't keep the frustration out of my voice. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't know what to do. I thought if I ignored him, he would just go away." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. "Ignoring him clearly isn't working. We need to deal with this." "How?" she asked, desperation in her voice. "We'll get a restraining order if we have to," I said firmly. "But you need to promise me that you'll tell me everything from now on. No more hiding things. I promise," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Just then the doorbell rang. We both froze. "Who could that be?" Karen whispered. I walked to the door, my heart pounding. I peered through the peephole and saw a police officer standing on the porch. I opened the door, a sense of dread washing over me. "Can I help you, officer?" "Mr. Thompson?" he asked, looking at me with a serious expression. "Yes, that's me," I replied. "We received a call about a disturbance at this address. Is everything all right?" I glanced back at Karen, who was standing in the hallway looking terrified. "Yes, everything's fine. I'm not sure who called." The officer nodded. "We've had several reports of a man loitering around your property. We just wanted to make sure everything is okay." My heart sank. That must be him, my wife's ex-lover. He's been harassing her. "We can file a report and keep an eye on the area," the officer said. "If he shows up again, give us a call immediately." "Thank you," I said, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. As the officer left, I turned to Karen. "We need to get serious about this. He's not going to go away on his own." She nodded, wiping away tears. "I know, I'm so sorry, Mark. We'll handle this," I said, trying to reassure her even as I felt my own resolve wavering. "We'll get through it." For the next few days, we filed a report with the police and talked to a lawyer about getting a restraining order. But even as we took these steps, the tension between us continued to grow. The strain of dealing with her lover's harassment, on top of trying to rebuild our shattered trust, was taking its toll. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, Karen looked at me with a troubled expression. "Mark, there's something else I need to tell you." I felt a sense of dread. "What is it now, Karen?" She hesitated, then said, "I've been feeling really sick lately. I thought it was just the stress, but I think I might be pregnant." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I stared at her, unable to process what she was saying. "Pregnant? Are you sure?" "I'm not sure," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I need to take a test." My mind was reeling. If she was pregnant, whose baby was it? The thought was too much to bear. "We'll deal with this," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "We'll take the test and figure it out." The next morning, Karen took a pregnancy test. I waited anxiously in the living room, my heart pounding. When she finally came out of the bathroom, she was holding the test, her hands shaking. "It's positive," she whispered, her voice filled with fear. I felt a wave of emotions crash over me. Anger, betrayal, confusion. "We need to see a doctor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to find out how far along you are." Over the next few days, we went to appointments, talked to doctors, and tried to piece together a timeline. The uncertainty was agonizing, and through it all, her lover continued to hover on the edges of our lives, a constant reminder of her betrayal. One evening, after another tense day of appointments and conversations, Karen and I sat on the couch, exhausted. "I'm so sorry, Mark," she said, her voice breaking. "I never wanted any of this to happen." "I know," I said, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "But we're in this mess now, and we have to deal with it." As we sat there, the weight of our situation pressing down on us, I couldn't help but wonder if our marriage could survive this. The road ahead seemed impossibly long and fraught with obstacles, but for now, all we could do was take it one day at a time and hope that somehow we could find our way through the darkness. The news of Karen's pregnancy added a whole new layer of complexity to our already strained relationship. We spent the next few weeks in a haze of doctor appointments and difficult conversations, trying to figure out what to do next. The uncertainty of the baby's paternity weighed heavily on both of us. One evening, as we were sitting in the living room, Karen turned to me, her face pale and tired. "Mark, I think we need to have another talk." I sighed, already feeling the exhaustion of yet another emotionally charged discussion. "What is it now?" She took a deep breath, looking down at her hands. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about the baby, about everything, and I think we need to consider all our options." "What do you mean, all our options?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "I mean, we need to think about what's best for the baby," she said, her voice trembling. "If it's his, I don't know if I can raise this child knowing what happened." Anger flared inside me. "So what? You want to give the baby up for adoption? Or worse, you're thinking about an abortion?" "I don't know, Mark," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what to do. I'm scared and confused, and I just want to do what's right." I stood up, pacing the room. "What's right? What's right is that we face this together, no matter what. We're in this mess because of your choices, and we have to deal with the consequences." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I know I made a terrible mistake, but I can't change the past. All I can do is try to make things right now." "And how do you propose we do that?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Because right now it feels like we're drowning in problems with no way out. We could get a paternity test," she suggested quietly. "Then we would at least know for sure." I stopped pacing, considering her words. It was a logical step, but it wouldn't solve everything. "Fine," I said finally. "We'll get the test, but regardless of the result, we need to start thinking about our future. What do we want for this baby? For us?" She nodded, wiping away her tears. "I agree. Let's start with the test, and then we can figure out the rest." The next few days were a whirlwind of appointments and waiting. The tension between us was palpable, every conversation charged with the weight of our uncertain future. Finally, the day of the paternity test arrived. We went to the clinic together, the silence between us heavy and uncomfortable. As we waited for the results, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in such a short time. Our marriage, once solid and dependable, now felt like it was teetering on the edge of a cliff, and this baby, an innocent life caught in the middle of our mess, deserved so much better than the chaos we had created. When the results finally came in, we sat together in the doctor's office, holding our breath. The doctor looked at us, his expression serious. "The test confirms that the baby is not Mark's." When the patient gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, I felt a rush of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness, all crashing into me at once. "So it's his," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Karen nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I never meant for any of this to happen." I stood up, needing to get out of that room, needing to breathe. "I need some air," I said, walking out without another word. As I stepped outside, the cool air hit my face, and I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The reality of our situation was crushing, and I felt completely lost. Karen joined me a few minutes later, standing beside me in silence. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice small and fragile. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. "But we need to figure it out, for the baby's sake, if not for ours." The next few days were a blur of difficult conversations and tough decisions. We talked about our options, about what was best for the baby, about how to move forward. It was clear that our marriage would never be the same, but we both wanted to do right by the child. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Karen looked at me with a determination I hadn't seen in a long time. I asked, "I want to raise this baby. I want to make things right." "And how do you plan to do that?" I asked, my voice tinged with skepticism. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I want to try. I want to be, of course, a good mother, and I want to fix things between us." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. Despite everything, a part of me still loved her, still wanted to believe that we could find a way through this. "Still right," I said finally. "We'll give it a shot, but it's going to take a lot of work, and you need to understand that trust doesn't come back overnight." "I understand," she said, reaching out to take my hand, "but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." As we sat there holding hands, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to heal and build a future for ourselves and the baby. But deep down, I knew that the challenges were far from over. We had taken a step forward, but there were still so many obstacles to overcome, and the presence of her lover lurking in the background was a constant reminder that our troubles were far from resolved. The revelation that the baby was not mine hit me hard, but Karen's determination to make things right gave me a sliver of hope. We had agreed to raise the child together, but there was still a lot to sort out. We had a long way to go before our relationship could be mended, if it ever could. One afternoon, as I was working from home, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the park near your house, 4 p.m. My heart sank. It had to be him. I glanced at the clock. It was already 3:30. I debated ignoring the message, but I knew that facing him was inevitable. I grabbed my keys and headed out. When I arrived at the park, I spotted him sitting on a bench looking smug as ever. I walked over, my hands clenched into fists. "What do you want?" He looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. "I wanted to see how you're holding up, Mark. It's not easy, is it?" I glared at him, resisting the urge to punch him. "Cut the crap. What do you want?" He leaned back, spreading his arms across the back of the bench. "I want to make sure Karen and the baby are taken care of. They're my responsibility now," I said through gritted teeth. "You're not part of this." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You really think you can just take over? That baby is mine, and I have rights." "Rights?" I spat, my anger boiling over. "You lost any rights the moment you decided to sleep with a married woman." He stood up, stepping closer to me. "Look, Mark, I know I've made mistakes, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm the father, and I deserve to be part of the baby's life." I took a deep breath, trying to control my temper. "You're not welcome in our lives. Stay away from Karen and the baby, or I swear I will do everything in my power to keep you out." He smirked again, his confidence unshaken. "We'll see about that. You can't keep a father from his child." I turned and walked away, not trusting myself to stay calm any longer. As I left the park, I felt a mix of frustration and fear. This man, this intruder in our lives, was not going to go away quietly. When I got home, Karen was waiting for me, worry etched on her face. "What happened? You look upset." I told her about the meeting, about his insistence on being part of the baby's life. She looked pale, her hands trembling. "What are we going to do?" "We'll talk to the lawyer," I said, trying to sound confident. "We'll figure out how to keep him away." Karen nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about protecting our future, our family. The next day we met with our lawyer. He explained the legal options, but none of them were foolproof. You can file for a restraining order, but it might not be granted unless he poses a clear threat. As the biological father, he does have rights. It's going to be a complicated fight. I felt a wave of frustration. Nothing was easy. "What do we do in the meantime?" "Document everything," the lawyer advised. "Every interaction, every threat. Build a case and be prepared for a long battle." As we left the lawyer's office, I felt the weight of our situation pressing down on me. One squeezed my hand, her eyes pleading, "We'll get through this, right?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure. "Yes, we will, but it's going to take everything we've got." The following weeks were tense. We lived in a constant state of vigilance, waiting for the next confrontation, the next intrusion. Karen and I tried to focus on rebuilding our relationship, but the stress took its toll. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch, Karen turned to me, tears in her eyes. Mark, I need to tell you something. I braced myself for more bad news. What is it? I ran into him at the grocery store today, she said, her voice trembling. He told me he's going to fight for custody. He won't back down. Anger surged through me. He's relentless, but we can't let him win. We have to stand our ground. She nodded, wiping away her tears. I know, but it's so hard I feel like I'm losing my mind. I pulled her into a hug, trying to offer some comfort. We'll get through this. We'll fight him together. As the days turned into weeks, the tension only grew. Karen and I continued to attend counseling, trying to mend the rift between us. But every time we made progress, another encounter with her lover would set us back. One night, I came home to find Karen sitting on the floor of the nursery, surrounded by baby clothes and toys. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with despair. Mark, I don't know if I can do this. I knelt beside her, taking her hand. We can do this. We have to. But what if he wins? What if he takes the baby away from us? We whispered, her voice breaking. I squeezed her hand, trying to reassure her. We won't let that happen. We'll fight with everything we have. The next day, I received a call from our lawyer. Mark, I have some news. He filed for custody. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. What do we do now? We fight, the lawyer said firmly. We gather evidence, we build our case, and we fight him in court. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of dread. The battle was just beginning, and it was going to be a long, hard road. But I knew we had to do whatever it took to protect our family. Karen and I spent the next few days preparing for the legal battle ahead. We documented everything, gathered evidence, and met with our lawyer regularly. The stress was overwhelming, but we had no choice but to push through. One evening, as we were sitting at the kitchen table, Karen looked at me with a determined expression. Mark, we need to do something drastic. I frowned, unsure of what she meant. What do you mean? She took a deep breath. We need to move, start fresh somewhere else, away from him. The idea was both terrifying and appealing. You think that will solve our problems? It might not solve everything, she admitted, but it could give us a chance to start over, to rebuild our lives without him constantly hanging over us. I considered her words, feeling the weight of the decision. Moving would be a huge upheaval, but staying felt like a losing battle. All right, I said finally. Let's do it. Let's start fresh. As we began making plans to move, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the fresh start we needed. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a chance to leave the past behind and build a new future together. But even as we packed our things and prepared to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that the past was not so easily left behind. There were still so many challenges ahead, so many battles to fight, and as long as her lover was out there, our troubles were far from over. Deciding to move was the first real step towards reclaiming our lives. Karen and I packed up our home, each box a symbol of our past and the promise of a new beginning. We found a small house in a quiet town a few hours away, far enough to distance ourselves from him, but close enough to maintain our jobs and routine. The move was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. We spent days sorting through our belongings, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. With each item we packed, it felt like we were leaving a piece of our old life behind, making room for a new chapter. The first night in our new home was eerily quiet. Karen and I lay in bed, the unfamiliar sounds of the house and the neighborhood creating a strange sense of unease. I reached out and took her hand. We'll make this work, I said softly. We have to. She squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with determination. I know. This is our chance to start over. In the days that followed, we settled into our new routine. We found a new counselor and continued our sessions, working through the layers of pain and betrayal. It wasn't easy, but the distance from our old life seemed to help. There were no familiar places to remind us of the past, no chance encounters with people who knew our story. But the peace was short-lived. One evening, as we were unpacking the last of our boxes, Karen received a text from an unknown number. She froze, her face going pale. "It's him," she whispered. I felt a surge of anger and frustration. What does he want now? She read the message aloud, her voice trembling. "I know where you are. You can't hide from me." My heart sank. The thought of him finding us, of him continuing to intrude on our lives, was unbearable. "We need to call the police," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We filed a report and contacted our lawyer, who reassured us that the restraining order was still in effect. But the fear lingered, a constant shadow over our new beginning. A few days later, we received a letter from the court. He was contesting the restraining order, claiming that he had a right to be involved in the baby's life. The court date was set, and we knew we were in for a tough battle. The weeks leading up to the court hearing were filled with tension and anxiety. Karen and I did our best to prepare, gathering evidence and working with our lawyer. But the stress took its toll. We argued more frequently, the pressure of the situation exacerbating the cracks in our relationship. The day of the hearing arrived, and we stood together outside the courtroom holding hands. "No matter what happens in there," I said, looking into her eyes, "we're in this together." She nodded, her grip on my hand tightening. Together. Inside the courtroom, we faced him for the first time since the move. He looked confident, a smug smile playing on his lips. It took all my self-control not to lash out. The hearing was a blur of legal jargon and emotional testimonies. Our lawyer presented our case, highlighting the harassment and the impact on our lives. Karen testified about the stress and fear she had experienced, her voice breaking as she recounted the encounters. When it was his turn to speak, he played the role of the concerned father, painting himself as a victim who just wanted to be part of his child's life. It was infuriating to listen to, but we had to stay composed. For what felt like an eternity, the judge finally made her decision. She upheld the restraining order, recognizing the pattern of harassment and the potential threat he posed. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. As we left the courtroom, Karen and I felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "We did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," I replied, wrapping my arm around her. "But this isn't over. We need to stay vigilant." Life gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy. The court ruling gave us some peace of mind, but the fear lingered. We installed security cameras around the house, changed our phone numbers, and made sure to stay alert. One evening, as we sat on the porch, Karen turned to me with a serious expression. "Mark, I know this has been incredibly hard, but I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you're doing for us, for the baby." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. "I made a commitment to you, Karen, to us, and I intend to keep it." She smiled, a genuine smile that I hadn't seen in a long time. "I love you, Mark. Despite everything, I still love you." "I love you too," I said, feeling a flicker of hope. "We'll get through this together." The next few months were a period of cautious optimism. Karen and I continued our counseling sessions, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. The baby was due soon, and we focused on preparing for the arrival, creating a nursery and attending prenatal classes. But just when things seemed to be settling down, an unexpected event threw our lives into chaos once again. One afternoon, I received a call from Karen while I was at work. She sounded panicked. "Mark, you need to come home now!" I rushed home, my heart pounding. When I arrived, I found Karen standing in the driveway, a piece of paper clutched in her hand. "What is it?" I asked, dread filling my stomach. She handed me the paper, her hands shaking. It was a letter from a lawyer representing him. He was suing for joint custody of the baby. "This can't be happening," I said, my voice filled with disbelief. "After everything we've been through, he still won't leave us alone." Karen burst into tears, collapsing into my arms. "What are we going to do, Mark? I can't go through this again." I held her tightly, feeling a surge of protectiveness. "We'll fight this. We won't let him take our baby." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional turmoil. Our lawyer assured us that we had a strong case, but the stress was overwhelming. Karen's health began to suffer, and I worried constantly about the impact on the baby. One night, as we lay in bed, Karen turned to me, her face pale and tired. "Mark, I can't do this anymore. The stress is too much. I'm scared for the baby." I stroked her hair, feeling a sense of helplessness. "I know, Karen, but we have to keep fighting for our family." As the court date approached, we prepared ourselves for another battle. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we were determined to protect our child and our future. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and we stood together outside the courtroom holding hands. "No matter what happens," I said, looking into her eyes, "we're in this together." We nodded, her grip on my hand tightening together. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Our lawyer presented our case, emphasizing the harassment and the impact on our lives. Karen testified about the stress and fear she had experienced, her voice breaking as she recounted the encounters. When it was his turn to speak, he once again played the role of the concerned father, painting himself as a victim who just wanted to be part of his child's life. It was infuriating to listen to, but we had to stay composed. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally made her decision. She ruled in our favor, denying his request for joint custody and upholding the restraining order. As we left the courtroom, Karen and I felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "We did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," I replied, wrapping my arm around her. "But this isn't over. We need to stay vigilant." Life gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy. The court ruling gave us some peace of mind, but the fear lingered. We installed security cameras around the house, changed our phone numbers, and made sure to stay alert. One evening, as we sat on the porch, Karen turned to me with a serious expression. "Mark, I know this has been incredibly hard, but I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you're doing for us, for the baby." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. "I made a commitment to you, Karen, to us, and I intend to keep it." She smiled, a genuine smile that I hadn't seen in a long time. "I love you, Mark. Despite everything, I still love you." "I love you too," I said, feeling a flicker of hope. "We'll get through this together." The next few months were a period of cautious optimism. Karen and I continued our counseling sessions, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. The baby was due soon, and we focused on preparing for the arrival, creating a nursery and attending prenatal classes. But just when things seemed to be settling down, an unexpected event threw our lives into chaos once again. One afternoon, I received a call from Karen while I was at work. She sounded panicked. "Mark, you need to come home. Now!" I rushed home, my heart pounding. When I arrived, I found Karen standing in the driveway, a piece of paper clutched in her hand. "What is it?" I asked, dread filling my stomach. She handed me the paper, her hands shaking. It was a letter from a lawyer representing him. He was suing for joint custody of the baby. "This can't be happening," I said, staring at the letter in disbelief. The ink on the paper felt like a taunting reminder that our fight was far from over. Karen's eyes were filled with tears, and I knew we were about to enter the hardest phase of this nightmare. "We have to stop him," Karen whispered, her voice trembling. "We can't let him take our baby." "We won't," I said firmly, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We'll fight this with everything we have." Over the next few days, we worked closely with our lawyer, preparing for the upcoming custody battle. We gathered all the evidence of his harassment and documented every instance where he had tried to interfere in our lives. Our lawyer assured us that we had a strong case, but the fear of losing was always in the back of our minds. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and as we walked into the courtroom, I felt a sense of determination wash over me. We were fighting for our family, and I refused to let this man tear us apart. Our lawyer began by presenting our case, detailing the harassment and the impact it had on Karen's health and our relationship. He emphasized the stability we had built in our new home and the efforts we were making to provide a loving environment for the baby. Karen testified next, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. She spoke about the fear and anxiety she had endured and how she had tried to distance herself from him to protect our family. Her honesty and vulnerability were palpable, and I could see the judge listening intently. When it was his turn to speak, he continued to play the role of the concerned father. He spoke about his desire to be involved in the child's life, portraying himself as a victim who had been unfairly shut out. His performance was convincing, but I hoped the judge could see through his facade.